Hello, and welcome to yet another Greenbelt at Home Nature Bite. My name is Angel Ehlers, and I am an environmental educator with New York City Parks out of the beautiful Staten Island Greenbelt, where we are reporting today from this cold and stark wintry landscape where I can actually see my breath as I'm talking to you. And if we were to look around, upon first glance, we might only see the sleeping trees and plants and animals that make this season, winter, feel really calm and quiet and maybe even a little empty. But when searching for signs of life while on a hike in the deep, dark winter, we're sure to notice some plants that are still actively working to stay green all winter long, and even into next year's growing season. These are called evergreens, and the Greenbelt has so many different kinds to learn about. You may already know that when it comes to trees, they generally come in two varieties, either deciduous or evergreen. Deciduous means they lose their leaves all at once because of a change in temperature or moisture, while evergreens also lose their leaves or needles, but it happens gradually, so it's pretty much imperceptible to our eyes. This is due to the fact that they retain water and nutrients in their hard leaves better than deciduous trees' leaves do. The gradual loss of needles and leaves also helps to reinforce their survival by continually fixing and balancing the nutrient makeup of the soil surrounding the tree. So due to their very unique characteristics of being able to retain their greenness even in the coldest months of the year, evergreens carry with them very strong symbolism that goes throughout time and across various different cultures, generally representing eternity, immortality, strength, and resilience. Evergreens tend to have needles instead of leaves, and they also tend to be conifers. But what's a conifer? What does that mean? Conifer means that it grows a cone. That's right, just like a pine cone. And in that cone is where its seeds can be found. Some of the most common coniferous evergreens that we can find here in the Greenbelt are pine trees, spruce trees. You know what? Instead of me listing it, just follow me. Also known as the Iroquois Tree of Peace, the eastern white pines used to have extensive stands throughout the Northeast, but they've been so exploited by logging and building that only 1% have survived. You can identify this tree by its branching bunches of 5 needles per cluster, or fascicle. Their needles have traditionally been made into a mild pine needle tea, and their sap was processed into pitch glue by the Lenape people who lived here on Staten Island. And they do grow cones where their seeds are stored until released. Spruce trees probably scream winter in New York City to us because we recognize them as some of the most common evergreens on the leafless forested landscape. They're also really familiar to us because they're some of the most common trees to be used as Christmas trees. There are many species of spruce trees, all of which have the potential to grow really tall and old, given the right conditions. The roots of some species of spruce were used by Native Americans of North America to weave baskets and to sew together birch bark to make canoes. And they continually provide important habitat and food for many native species of animal and insect, including birds, moths, and butterflies. English yews are not native to this continent, but you may recognize their needles and their branches from similar yews used in local landscaping, especially as hedges. When they aren't manicured on your neighbor's property, the yew tree lends its natural evergreenness to the winter landscape of many forested areas, bringing with them the symbolism of longevity and regeneration as one of the longest lived native species in all of Europe, where they traditionally are the understory of beech woodlands. Sound familiar? Even as hedges, yews provide excellent habitat and protection for local species of urban wildlife. Okay, so how about this one? Is this an evergreen in the Greenbelt? I'd say absolutely, it definitely is. Because it looks like somebody dumped their Christmas tree here on the side of the road, which happens to be a part of the Greenbelt. Although this is a common occurrence, we do not encourage this to happen. We actually have an alternative for you. And NYC Parks started something really cool called Mulch Fest. So you can actually take your Christmas tree at the end of your holiday season to a number of locations and have it turned into mulch to be used in New York City parks. You can even take home a bag for your own landscaping or garden if you want. So check out nycgovparks.org for a list of locations to find the one closest to you for next year. So do you remember when I mentioned those special cases where there's a tree that's an evergreen, but it's not a conifer and it doesn't even have needles? Well, here's a really great example of that. The holly tree is a broadleaf evergreen that is a common small shrub tree of the forest understory. You can see large ones like this or small ones all throughout the Greenbelt. I'm sure just looking at this holly reminds you of the holiday season, with its shiny dark green leaves, the spikes on the edges, and the bright red berries. The berries are an important food source for local birds and small mammals, which return the favor by spreading the seeds throughout the forest. Usually, when we think about evergreens, we think about big, tall trees. But trees are not the only plants that retain their evergreenness all throughout the year. Come on a quick trip with me as we look for some of the non-tree plants that still speckle the winter landscape with green. Up here in High Rock Park, we have our very own native rhododendron garden. You may not have heard of rhododendrons before, but I bet if you've walked up here, you've actually seen these really beautiful evergreen shrubs. The name rhododendron is derived from the Greek words rhodon for rose and dendron for tree. And when you see the beautiful flowers that they grow, you totally understand why. The leaves of the rhododendron shrub are simple, up to 8 inches long, leathery, and dark green, with whitish pinkish flowers that grow early in the summer. The next evergreen shrub that we're going to talk about has a really funny name, and it's called Doghobble. I'm actually surrounded by it right now. Doghobble can be found in a few different locations in High Rock Park, but it mostly enjoys moist, acidic areas. Their beautiful bell-shaped flowers encourage visits from pollinators in late spring, and their sweet fragrance is a welcome sensory experience in the bustling forest. They lend their long, leathery, evergreen leaves and thicket-like growing habits to our wintry landscape, and we love to see them at all times of year. We're really used to seeing ferns in the warmer months, but some species, like this Christmas fern, are actually evergreen. The fern fronds stand straight up throughout the year until the first true frost, when they are flattened to the ground by cold temperatures and snow cover, as we can see here, and they wait for warmer weather. It is actually one of the most common ferns found throughout eastern North America, in moist, shady woodland habitats and stream banks, just like here at Egbertville Ravine. There are a number of alliums, the family of garlic and onions, that grow throughout the Greenbelt and wild in our urban green spaces. And these wild onions are some of the evergreens that we can see and spot and even nibble on throughout the year. Growing from a bulb underground, these tubular snacks are plentiful and smell really great. Just take a small sample from a healthy plant to experience the mouth-watering and very familiar smell. And remember that if it smells like an onion, it is an onion. Always remember to harvest only from areas where people don't walk their dogs or pesticides are sprayed. You're going to want to come in close for this one to check out what I found. I found striped wintergreen, which is one of the smallest and closest to the ground plants that we're going to talk about today. Their evergreen qualities are present even in their name, as they will retain their green leaves even when they are surrounded by snow. This plant was traditionally used by some Native American people to make a tea from the leaves to treat stomach problems, and applied as a poultice for cuts and wounds. Many species of mosses thrive throughout the Greenbelt, and they love some of the darkest, dampest spots that they can find, just like here at Loosestrife Swamp. These non-flowering plants can get really dry and shrivel up in the hot heat of the summer, but in the cooler, moister months, their lush, supple greenness really has space and the proper conditions to thrive. Mosses can be found on many street trees and along sidewalk cracks as well. There are even some invasive plant species that are evergreens. And although we're not crazy about some of the rampant devastation that these aggressively growing plants can cause, we're talking about evergreens in the Greenbelt here, and some of them are evergreen in the Greenbelt. So let's take a look and start to learn to identify some of these invasive plant species. Our area does have a few native trumpet vine honeysuckles, which are well-behaved and beautiful evergreens. But what you're most likely to see is this invasive woody vine, Japanese honeysuckle. In Chinese, the name for this plant translates to winter enduring vine, and it is traditionally used in Chinese medicine to treat various ailments, including fever, headache, cough, sore throat, and more. And although it is invasive to this area, having escaped its initial ornamental intention, it is still sometimes planted for erosion control and deer browsing purposes. The next plant we're going to talk about may look very familiar, may even sound very familiar, but it is not from around here. This actually seems to have escaped from somebody's backyard, but it is bamboo, which is in fact an evergreen, which can be found throughout different parts of the Greenbelt. Bamboo is a plant that is native to some of the most warm tropical regions of the world, and they're very culturally and economically significant to many southern and eastern Asian regions for building materials, food, and more. Bamboo is one of the fastest growing plants on the planet due to its unique shallow but horizontal growing root system. Because it is a hardy evergreen, it is an important symbol of strength, flexibility, and endurance in Chinese culture, which given its characteristics makes perfect sense to us. The Greenbelt is home to a few native vine species like poison ivy. However, the Greenbelt also creates space for the rampant growth of the English ivy vine. English ivy is not from around here. It was introduced to this area for ornamental reasons, and their seeds and vines spread to areas where they were never intended to grow. As you can see, English ivy is in fact a beautiful evergreen, but it tends to slowly overtake all the trees in a particular area to the detriment of the trees. And although we might think it's really beautiful, I'm sure the trees don't like that much at all. Now let's talk for just a moment about those conifers that have needles and cones, but they aren't evergreen. There are a few tree species that behave this way, including the majestic bald cypress tree that can be found here lining the lake at Willowbrook Park. In fact, the name bald cypress refers to the fact that this deciduous conifer loses all of its leaves in autumn. The bald cypress is most common in wet areas in the deep south, but it has been cultivated up through the mid-Atlantic states as well, and even as street trees here in New York City. We can also see one of their most special features called knees, which naturalists have hypothesized are a special adaptation which allows their roots to try to reach the oxygen above the water that they traditionally grow near. Wow, what an incredible trip that was with you throughout the Greenbelt in search of all of the different evergreens that there are. We found so much life out there, even on this incredibly cold winter day. But I was wondering, was there anything that I forgot? Any evergreens that I left out that you know about throughout the Greenbelt? If so, send me an email and let me know what you've discovered so that I can learn from you also. And until then, don't forget, no matter how quiet the forest or how cold a winter's day, it is always full of life, full of energy, and full of hope for a whole new season of warmth and growth. And that's exactly what evergreens represent. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Greenbelt at Home virtual program. If you're interested in more content just like this, be sure to visit our YouTube channel at the Staten Island Greenbelt. We can also be found on Facebook at the Greenbelt Conservancy and Greenbelt Environmental Education pages, on Instagram at SI Greenbelt, as well as on our website at sigreenbelt.org. We work really hard to create content for everyone, and we can't wait to see you either out on these trails or right there where you are enjoying Greenbelt at home.